Okay, welcome everybody. We are sitting here together with Axel Sommerlatt, CIO of Drägerwerk in Lübeck, and we had a phenomenal project with him. That was the reorganization of his IT branch, so to say, within Dräger, and he decided to do this with a group of almost 90 people who were working on this new operating model. And we did that all on remote within 3 months during the Corona crisis. So lots of big points there that we were facing during that time. But before we start to talk about what we have done, first of all, welcome, Axel. And my first question would be, so why did you come up with this this approach? What was your first idea? Why did you say we need a bottom-up movement for this operating model?
Thank you for the question. So from the start off, we always had we talk about an evolution and not a classical reorganization. And to be for the background, I took over the position January 1st, 2020, so this year, and I wanted to give myself a little bit more time to look at the organization itself. But as sometimes life plays, somebody left the organization, and I said, okay, what do we do now? And instead of starting now to reshuffle the deck with a reorganization, we said, let's go from inside. We flattened out the organization on the first hierarchy level to get less hierarchy into the organization. And then we were at the moment to say, okay, now do we build out the next hierarchy level, classical with the org chart, or what do we do? And we come to the conclusion that was right at the time where COVID-19 started in March, saying, no, it's not the right thing to discuss classical org charts anymore. We want to talk about how we going to work together with one another. Therefore, we said, okay, let's work on our operating model. And the original plan was, okay, let's meet and work on that. Then Corona hit full steam, and we knew that working remote is the only option. And we always said, when we do that, we want to involve our business partners with us, because it's not a global IT operating model. It's something which we want to make sure that we generate business outcome. And that's where we got in contact with one another, I think, in the April timeframe, because we said, okay, with everything going on, and you can imagine the operational task on the global IT within Dräger was hefty. So, and we had a lot of topics there to make people work from home with over 10,000 employees working remote. At the same time, we didn't want to let the opportunity go by, because we had momentum regarding the evolution. So that's why we reached out to the outside, that who can facilitate such a process.
Okay, thank you. And when we learned about your project, we were thinking, oh, that's really a progressive approach. And it's quite a challenge as well. So if you would, we all experience the challenges in between. Let's talk a little bit about what was the benefit of the process? How would you describe the process we have been through together? And what was the advantage and disadvantage as well, or challenge rather?
Yes. I had to smile because my middle name is Mr. Patience, and
not.
So I clearly had in mind that we needed to have an operating model ready in the first evolutionary step as an iteration by the end of the summer. That was strongly built in my mind. I said we have to come out by the late August with something. That was clear for me to say we had to have an operating model, how it would look like, and what the process would be to get there. I put the trust in the team and in the colleagues. And you mentioned there were a lot of colleagues involved international also. I said, let's do a good process. If you have a good process, we trust the process and we trust the colleagues, and something will come out of that. And that was the equation. Certainly there was some boundary conditions to say we know that we wanted to generate customer impact, and we wanted to make sure that they are self-organization. But I learned also that we have to walk before we run, and going through a virtual design thinking process, put everybody out of their comfort zone at some stage of the process. And there were also times where I challenged myself at night and said, oh, putting purely the trust in the people and putting the trust in the process, and certainly also putting the trust in you, was it the right approach? In hindsight, I can say definitely it paid back twice now, because I have not you anymore on board in the transition, but I have the people on board because it's their operating model. And we are talking about how to evolve this operating model, putting it into life. But I never had a discussion that somebody can come back and say, oh, Axel, you have a situation that's operating model by somebody else, but it was really developed by the people. That's a big advantage. At the same time, I have to learn in design thinking, especially virtual, but I think it's even on the ground. Somebody will always be unhappy because they are out of their comfort zone.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Maybe we quickly describe for the audience what we did. We did 8 workshops. No, now I get all confused. We have had 5 days of workshop for 5 design teams and alignment workshops in between, with about 20 people each at each design team, and we went through a process. Ansgar, you can explain it a little bit more as well, but let us say a problem phase where we were digging deep into the problems for 2 days, and that was easy for a person with personality traits like, oh, let's find the default, let's find the real problem, and let's dig into problems. And it was hard for the more creative type of personality who wanted to think into solutions. And the other way around, when we came into the solution phase, I experienced that it was the other way around. Then the creative type of person was thinking, yes, let's go for a solution and let's be crazy about it. And the other people were thinking, well, well, you are the experts. You have to tell us what the operating model is supposed to look like. And I must admit, I found it a really relief that you, Axel, really did trust the process. And although all 3 of us have been through a phase where we're thinking, oh dear, what is going to be the outcome? But we all have been reflected enough and experienced enough that we knew this is a normal phase within the change process, that you do get resistance, you do get frustration. And I'm really grateful for the fact, Axel, that you did trust it just as much as we did. That I find was the challenge. Ansgar, what could you add to that?
Well, trust the process was the most heard sentence in that whole 3 months, I would say, right? I think, Axel, you can remember how many, countless times we've said that, and especially in the design, with the design teams in problem space and the solution space. Yeah, that was trust the process, just trust the process. Let's move on. Yeah.
And oh, sorry, you answer.
No, I just wanted to add that it helped a lot, Axel, that you, from the beginning onwards, you always said, like, this is not a Sommerlatt show. This is not about what I consider correct or what I consider being the best solution for our IT. I really keep myself calm. I will not step into the process. And that's something rarely seen, I would say, that a leader is really taking himself out of the whole equation completely. Of course, we had like update calls and we were talking about how it's going, but at no point you were coming in saying, okay, I now dive into the system and say, okay, but have you thought about this, or have you done that, or why is not this being discussed here? And I think that helped a lot for those people to open up and to have, like, to this day, we also talked about psychological safety, so to have an environment where it was safe to come up with crazy ideas, knowing that well, these are just ideas, and they will open up the creativity now.
And during the process, Axel, can you tell us what was your challenge, or how did you experience the process with the stakeholder around it?
Well, to be honest, if you know me, being somebody energetic, trying to get involved, holding back myself was probably for me personally the strongest challenge. And at the same time, to be honest, dealing with middle management and with my direct reports, how they are involved was also difficult, because I wanted to make really sure that the voices of the colleagues who do the daily work are heard. Mm-hmm. And at the beginning, it was like, okay, if I take a step back, please also line management below me take a step back and let the colleagues work on it. And with that, I generated also a little bit of frustration because they wanted to be engaged. At the same time, they didn't want to dominate the process. And I think that was a little bit shaky at the beginning. I'm glad that we involved them. And still the team had the feeling that an open atmosphere, and it was really driven by the employees. And I'm proud to say that when we came to the final operating model, which wasn't easy for the teams because they put a lot of heart into the different models, and 5 models, they were all good. And if you come to the point where you have to kill your own darling, then emotions are there. But I must say, because we did it twice, even in the smaller groups beforehand, people got used to it. And emotions got not in the way of choosing a really great operating model. And the great thing was, when presenting it to all the employees, no management was involved presenting it. It was actually the people who worked on the model who presented it for their colleagues, which generates a lot of buy-in now in the next phase, because once you have a model, it's a good starting point, but then you have to fill it with life. So that's another step which we are right now in the midst of it.
I only can tip my head again. It was really, there were 5 very good prototypes at the end, and just as you said, to kill your darling, you have worked on this for months, literally, and then you know there can only be one, the chosen one, and well, it was a crazy day. It was full of energy, and at the end, everybody was fine with this chosen operating model, and that was.
Yes, but I remember relief vividly as well. They definitely have been there.
And actually, towards the end of the process, I got more calmer because I know the process was working, and I was not attached personally to one idea, which is great, because if you facilitate the process and you're attached, so I was actually calm, but the emotions on the colleagues who invested so much time and energy and love into their operating model was certainly running higher. And therefore, I was really positively surprised that we came with a message you also brought to the table, not to the smallest common denominator, but to the biggest common denominator by a big vote. So it was not a cliffhanger vote, but it was a strong direction in one favorite model, which was chosen by the whole team.
Yeah,
it was a clear choice. Yeah, absolutely.
So yes, there was
you want me to show you a little bit about the model?
Yeah, sure.
Timing.
Sure.
So you came up with we came up after the process. We came up with a prototype, right? Just to tell the audience, and we came and there was a prototype chosen out of these 90 people. And now what have you done with that? We are curious about that.
Can you see my picture?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so in a nutshell, and keep in mind that people work really diligently on that, and there are a lot of more slides to it. But what we want to try to accomplish with this operating model, we want to make sure, and I will show a couple of more slides on it, user-centric, business outcome-oriented. A classical example is if people want to work towards what we do right now, collaborate, they don't care about the technology, they want to collaborate. So we really have to make sure that we put technology second and really user and business outcome first. We really were big on the product teams. So the team wanted really go into product teams with a lot of autonomy. Each product team is purpose-driven. We will talk about continuous innovation, data-driven decision-making, so no gut feeling, but really consent-based decision-making. So you can see elements out of also toolboxes which you are familiar with. Now I have to get it right in English. Sociokratie is 3.0. How do you call it in English?
Sociokratie.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Thanks, 3.0. So the role of management will change. So that's a lot of to do on our side, being more a servant leadership and adapting the process and the culture. If I go one slide further, you can see that we talk about products, but in a not hierarchically dimension, but really towards the customer on one side, but we also have inner products. I don't go into too much detail. It will be guided with some governance and some portfolio management, but really important is, that's an example which we are already living. Dräger website, we have a product owner who can come out of the business, or he or she can come out of the IT, and we surround these product owners with the right skill set so that they can make the right decision. So if the Dräger website has to be improved, they have owned it all the way to the end. If hopefully it doesn't happen, but if it would go down, they feel the ownership of bringing it back up to life and so on. So we have
just one second. This is an outcome out of these prototypes. I mean, this is already glossy marketing material from my perspective. This is really what came out there. I mean, I was so impressed.
So this is one-to-one take. So this was the final presentation element of the final presentation by one of the teams, and actually it was also the chosen operating model. So I didn't do any tweaking afterwards. So you can see how much passion they put into that in this design thinking approach. And up to now, I use it day in, day out, or with my stakeholders to explain the model. Mm-hmm. So that's it in a nutshell. And since around about 1/3 of the organization has worked on the model, we still have 2/3 to get into the flow, because it's all about change. And that is right now the step which we are taking on our own speed, because you can imagine I have to balance out a little bit how quickly can we go in such an evolution, because we are in November. I think 2020 is one of the longest years we ever had. At least it feels like, and we therefore have to balance a little bit about the speed of the implementation. And we are right now in the first steps of the implementation.
Yeah, impressive. Once more, impressive. What would you say, looking back, anything you really would like to have, if you would do it again, something that you really would like to change?
What I would probably do is I would even put not distinguish between colleagues and leadership, put them all in there and let it work themselves out, instead of that's something a learning. At the same time, I would probably at some stage also have facilitated other board members being there to facilitate that, just to see it live, how something like that works. Because if I talk now to board members about it, they say, wow, they certainly say it's still PowerPoint, Axel, we want to see it with live, but impressive. And therefore, we as a global IT, since we don't come with a top-down approach, we have to balance carefully that we don't over-promise and under-deliver, but really develop it in such a way that we show lighthouses, show that it's working, and then hopefully with this operating model, we can also evolve further in the whole organization, because I truly believe the general setup and the mindset to get towards consent-based decision-making and so on is really something which helps us going forward as an overall organization, and not just in global IT. Okay, and for that, it's always good to have some ambassadors already in the business, because keep in mind, we had business people involved already from the beginning.
Definitely. Do you like to de-share, or you still want to show something else?
If you want to, always a key question I get also from other stakeholders is, so how do you bring it to life?
Okay.
And if you want to, I can try to show it.
Yes, that would be good, because that is, for the time being, that was just a theory, and now show us what you've done with it.
I just have to look at, have too many windows open. That's a classical one. Welcome to my world. So what we clearly see is, and I don't want to bore you with too much slides, that's why I went directly to the concept board, which is actually a great feature. I think with you guys, we use Miro, but concept board is the same way. You can really interact and have a really good workshop virtually. And we do our documentation right now on concept board. What you can clearly see is from your memories is that we keep the, so say, the design teams intact. These are the blue teams, but we added also additional topics like a regional team to define regional products. And we also have cross topics, and it's always a co-lead. And we evolve from an iteration perspective. We use DevOps, and we plan sprints and then cycles. And our first cycle is starting actually right now in November and goes until the end of February. Until end of February, we hope to have the first products live, but for that, a lot of work has to be done. And we run this as an evolution alignment team, but really with the mindset already that we live and breathe what we agreed upon, also from a cultural perspective, to have a high level. And it's not a top-down exercise, but you can see that people are involved from all over the organization within global IT, and the colleagues are in the center of the attention.
And by having a product live, what do you mean? What type of product do you talk about when you talk about product?
Yeah, for example, we have situations today where we have technologies for similar technologies for similar issues. And for example, if we do about collaboration, and I want to make sure that there's going to be one collaboration team to make sure that whatever we use there as a software, we give the perspective to the customer. We have technology we take care of, but we really take care of the customer needs. And this is just an example. And each area has to have 2 to 3 products live by the end of February. Mm-hmm. That's the minimum. The maximum, if somebody says, you know what, I'm ready, I can launch all my products, and I have my product team staff with the roles and everything is clear, be my guest. But it's a different mindset for me. It's a little bit like, it's a long time ago, I ran a marathon, but I was not so much at the top of the race. I was more looking towards the back where the guy comes with the bus to pick up people from the marathon. And my role here as a leader is to make sure that nobody is left behind. So I set the direction on the one hand side, okay, let's run a marathon, but I'm not going to be the one who's chasing at the beginning, but I'm really making sure that we get everybody on the same direction and hopefully not on the bus so that they can run the marathon. And so 2 to 3 products is the minimum. And everybody else can positively surprise me, but it's really important that the pace is set by the people, because keep in mind, we're doing that besides all the other activities, because there is no time out for this activity. The business still expects that all the projects are delivered. COVID-19 doesn't stop for evolution of global IT. Therefore, we have to somehow put it in a timing that it doesn't conflict with anything else what we are going within global IT right now. So that's the balancing out.
There's one point I cannot overemphasize here. It's the point that you can see this thing is living right now. And I don't know in how many reorganizations I have seen in my career where like the consultants come in, they draw the new boxes on the org chart and they leave, and that's it. It's done. It's over. And actually it's dead. Okay. And I feel, I mean, you should feel very proud of yourself that you have this alive, but I mean, I do a little bit as well.
Yeah, very happy as well to see that you made so much out of it. I would have one more question. You did tell me the other day that another department already came and say, oh yeah, fine, Axel, can we do that as well? What do you tell the people out there and your fellow colleagues who just want to copy paste your model into their organization? What would you give them? What kind of advice would you give them?
First of all, I say I'm not doing anything for money. It's all charity. So no copyrights, but that's not the point. You really have to define what is your problem first before you go into the solution. That's classical design thinking. And if you just run towards the solution, it might fix something which you don't need to be solved, or otherwise it may not fix your problem which you really have. So, and yes, certainly people were asking for shortcuts as well. Why not take just a Spotify or whatever model there is out there? And I don't say that we reinvented something fantastically new, but we took the best component which we saw out there and made it our own. And based not on gut feeling, but based on our problem situation which we had. So I would really definitely say, go take the people, give them power, and go through a design thinking approach.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. And the last question is, what was your biggest takeaway out of the process, or now while you're working on it and living the evolution?
Yeah, it's certainly understanding that it needs time, change needs time, and be patient. And from that perspective, making sure that you have a lot of people on the change management and agile coach side on your side. And I'm privileged. I have around about 10 agile coaches fully educated within global IT already, which is great, but they are close to the system. So I reached out and said, no, you know what, we have to do it on our own, Dräger, as well. Don't do too much external consulting, even if I like you guys, but at some stage we have to swim on our own. The point was then, so I reached out to the classical change manager, because we have them also on board. And that was an interesting experience for me, because they said, okay, got it, Axel, this is a classical change. So tell me exactly how will the org chart look first week of April 2021. And I said, you know what, the org chart doesn't matter to me. I can tell you what I think needs to happen, that the people feel on board and so on, that we nobody leaves behind. But there is no classical reorganization approach. And I saw the change manager, they were struggling with that, because they are used, oh, I have to get it from one stage to the other, and then my job is finished. I said, my job will never be finished. It's an evolution. And maybe one iteration will go quicker, one get slower, and we have to also have openness about failure culture. And I think we are relatively good to admit failures on a technical perspective. But I can tell you, we will make mistakes on the way regarding the evolution of global IT, also organizational. We will over push something, but the good thing is, no big deal, because in the next iteration, we can correct these mistakes again and learn out of them. And I definitely will say next problem phase will be interesting. It will probably not the problem which I see today, but there will be other ones which I will see. And working with the change managers there and understanding what an asset agile coaches can be in this kind of situation was a real learning for me.
Okay, thank you.
Inspect and adapt.
Yeah,
Inspect and adapt.
Pleasure working with you virtually over the whole summer, really. We started in May and ended in September. Now it's almost Christmas. Thank you for having us on your project. It was really a good experience for us as well. And yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you for kickstarting us, because without you, we wouldn't be where we are today.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Axel, we would like to start the Q&A session, and for everyone else, please raise your hands if you have a question to Axel. You can unmute yourself now, and we just facilitate who's next. Okay, so any questions to Axel? please raise your hand. No questions. Can't believe that. There we go. Ike, and please unmute yourself and ask your question to Axel.
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, wonderful. So, Axel, I saw on your slide with the process in the nutshell that there was the bubble with the data-driven decision making. So I know that decisions are always something from the heart, from the sometimes comes up spontaneously. So how did it work in the past at Dräger, and now did you implemented some kind of supercomputer like HAL 9000, which makes your decisions from what comes up from the field, or how does it work?
Thank you for your question there. It may be a little misleading. Data-driven, it was more the concept of consent-based decision-making. Dräger is a 130-year-old company, family-based, and you can imagine that sometimes decisions take really slow pace because everybody needs to get put on board. And we introduced with this operating model a consent-based decision-making, which certainly should be fact-based as much as possible, but sometimes, especially if you deal with organization, it's also some gut feeling involved. And the idea behind it is somebody puts up a proposal, and then you go through a kind of governance meeting set up where people can voice their concerns, and you can see whether these are concerns or objections. But you really drive towards, let's get a proposal on the table, and not in a way that everybody has to agree, but based on consent. So that's behind it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ike. And Patrick. Patrick, the word of the year, you mute.
Yeah, of course.
There we go.
Okay. Once again, thanks, Axel, for your presentation and sharing all those things with us. I would like to go back to the beginning. Normally, when you start such a project, you start with a kind of a vision that you maybe the purpose. Why do we do what we want to do? Yeah, and normally. It also initiates some kind of need for action, so the employees have the motivation and see the reason to start a change in the first place, right? So could you maybe give us some information on how you started this type of project with whatever vision, purpose, need for action, definition to get the employees into your boat of change?
Yes, Patrick, a really good point. There, maybe a little bit about the background. As I mentioned in the video, I took over the department on the area January 1st, 2020. And before that, the organization already worked on a vision mission statement, which was intact, but they were lagging how to get there. So the motivation was there, that there was a good vision and mission in place already, and which had also the buy-in, but it was really how do we now change organizationally towards it. So the momentum was there to say there is a goal line, and the question was how to get there. Therefore, I didn't have so much the motivational part to address, but more to show the process how to get there. Mm-hmm. And the classical challenges are there to give you some kind of what do we need to do is we have to think more in a collaborative approach, especially with the business, because nowadays most of the topics are not solely IT topics anymore. Most of them are business projects which have IT embedded in them. So therefore, the enablement working closer and finding an operating model where business and global IT are working hand in hand and on eye level is something motivation to the team, because sometimes they felt as being a little bit like the servant of the business only and not being on eye level. So that drives people to really try to work towards an eye level relationship. That's one example, Patrick.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Sabine is next.
Thanks, Axel. I would like to take up the topic that was just discussed, that it was the topic about the purpose-driven organization. What I would be interested in is, on the one hand, what is the purpose? How did you formulate it? Secondly, how did you develop it? And thirdly, how do you keep the focus of the organization on the purpose?
So we have an overarching purpose, which is for Dräger technology for life. So we have, as a company in itself, a really strong purpose. And I think 2020 is a true testament for that, being both exposed from the COVID-19 on protection masks on the one hand side, safety business and medical business, ventilators and so on. So probably most of you have heard about Dräger within 2020. So there is a purpose within the organization in itself. And then the next topic is, what is the purpose of the global IT? And that was done with a mission vision statement there. And it's relatively clear. It is making sure that we engage in an ability for the organization to have technology really in the foreground of our activities, and also from a digital perspective. And that's where we as Global IT step in. What you mentioned is, how do we keep the purpose up in the teams? And here I must say, this is still work in progress. I test it in a way, because you can imagine now that everybody said, oh, I have a product. And I turn around and said, okay, if you think you have a product, tell me what is the purpose of the product. So I turn it around and say, people, if you have a good purpose for your product, it's a product. If you don't have a purpose of your product, it's not a product. So, but I not demand it from top, but I say, if you come up with a good purpose for your product, then it's a product. And I leave it to the team.
Did that answer your question, Sabine?
Yes, thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you, Axel. Any more questions? I don't see any digital hands. Do you have any more questions for Axel? There we go. George.
Hello, hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
And see you. Oh, you're in space, George. That's gorgeous.
Yes. Thank you, Axel, for sharing this amazing business case and the transformation that you're implementing at this stage. I would like to ask you, because you've already given a few tips what the leaders need to do once that they want to start such an implementation program. What would be your advice for high management or senior management once they consider of restructuring the organization? What would be your advice?
Yeah, thank you. I think I would pick up on what Patrick and Sabine also said. I think you have to have a good mission in place. And you have to have also, therefore, a motivation for a change. That's the first thing. If you don't have that in place and the purpose line out, then I would fix that first before sending the team really into what we want to accomplish. The biggest topic is then really to let go. This feeling of I'm losing control as a leader is something you have to get used to. And if you start with the senior leadership management into the discussion, you really have to question, is he willing to lose control to some extent? Or is he really outcome focused to say, no, I have a clear perspective on outcome. If he has a clear perspective on outcome and says he wants it a certain way, maybe design thinking is not the right approach, because then it's just a shell game. Therefore, it's really, you have to really see what is the motivation of senior management. And that's where the Agile Coach come into play. And sometimes you even maybe have to say, you know what, if that is the case, great. But if you're outcome focused and you have a clear perspective, maybe I'm not the right help for you. And I truly believe that the world gets more and more complex. And if senior management believe that they always have the answers to all questions, I think history will tell them that they are wrong.
Okay, thank you, Axel. I think it already happened to you that someone wanted to copy paste the model you have just to the department, right?
Yes, which I take as something positive at the same time, as I mentioned, but it's a shortcut.
Yeah, it's just the same as if you would have just took Spotify and Squads and implemented that without thinking into IT Dräger. Would have been just the same.
And the good news is, if I listen to others, I certainly think that, like the Otto Group, they are further along the chain. But if I just heard a video the other day from the CEO there, and they mentioned that this loss of control and accepting that is a key ingredient. And if that is not given from senior management, I think it's really essential as an ingredient.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think it already has been said in the video, but I think the hardest part for us as this change team, was also to give up control and to breathe in, breathe out when things got rough. I think, it's always the same. There is another question from Patrick, I believe, or is it just your hand up?
No, it's a question if no one else has raised their hand, so I picked the time slot. If I understood correctly in the beginning, so your previous organization was kind of classical, I understood, with org charts, and you probably have high, mid, and low management levels, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now you change it to a rather flat hierarchy, I understood, and gave the empowerment to the people, basically, to decide purpose, product, yes or no. So how do you deal with the management levels? What are they doing now if they skipped from control-based leadership to trust-based leadership, which normally also might implement that they would have surely a different list of tasks to be managed?
This is a big change curve, Patrick, and we're in the middle of it. And we had a discussion the other day, that's why I had to smile, is hierarchy a bad word? And I said, no, there's a purpose for hierarchy, but the question is how we live it. Because I don't think an organization can't go at least without some hierarchy. But the question is, how do I live hierarchy? And here we have really a lot of change right now going on, where we coach especially middle management through that, because they are in a really bad situation. On the one hand side, they have to deliver operationally. At the same time, they have to enable the change. And I think for them, it's the hardest. And therefore, your point on, you have to facilitate this change. And I still have a disciplinary org chart. The point which I'm making right now is it's getting less and less important. It's like the street address where we live, but it doesn't tell you anymore how we work together. So, but this is a process, and it will not be in the first iteration. It will be an iterative approach, and sooner or later there will be still in HR, in the HR system, an org chart with cost centers and so on. But in the daily work, hopefully it will play less and less a role. But I have right now the situation that I have to make sure that hierarchy itself is not perceived as a negative thing.
Mm-hmm. And one more question to be added. Do you also already face situations where your managers have to decide, do I want to go that path or do leave, or is it not that tough yet?
To be honest, it's not that tough yet. And you can see that even that the employees, we work closely with the Workers' Council on it. And I had up to now over 200 employees. None of the employees, not one, went to the Workers' Council and says he doesn't feel comfortable with the process. Now you can question whether I'm not aggressive enough in the change. And that's a valid argument. At the same time, knowing what's going on within Dräger and looking at what we have produced at business outcome throughout 2020, it would be really the wrong message towards the organization, which did a lot of great job to push too much on the speed pedal now. But definitely, Patrick, certainly within 2021, I will be in couple of situations probably there where people have to decide, do you want to be part of the change, or do you say you find another organization? But I clearly see that this is the minority, and my focus as leadership is really focused on the 80 to 90%, which really want to go the way.
Okay, thank you very much. Excellent.
Thank you. Another question from Sabine.
Yes, after Patrick, I have to raise again a question. It goes a little bit into the same direction, because what I could imagine is that you have to manage somehow the ambidextrity between the whole organization, which is rather hierarchical, and your department, which is now getting more and more agile. And I would be interested to know how you manage that within Dräger.
Yes, and right now I'm doing a lot of talks with stakeholders, trying to get them on board with the new operating model and establishing lighthouses with them. But to be honest, Sabine, I'm really selective on that. I know to be fair, I've been with the organization 20 years. So in different functions. So I know pretty much who is in which state of mind regarding leadership. Classically control and command, or more towards the direction we are in right now in this kind of round. And therefore I pick right now also the partnerships. Now the question, once you get to a critical point where you could go further, you don't find the business partners. And that's why right now in the evolution I'm not facing the challenge. It will come at some stage, and then I will deal with it. But right now I'm privileged to be in the situation that I have enough business partners who want to go with me on the journey.
Thanks. Another question to George, and then we have soon come to an end.
I have a final question.
Ansgar has a final question. That's right, George.
Hi. Question regard. Okay. Now it's perfect. Can you hear me, guys?
Good.
If you're with us, Holy Ghost of George, please speak up.
I would like to ask Axel, how did
Okay, so then I have a final
Can you hear me, Axel?
Yeah.
So the room here is full with. Huh?
I can hear George.
Nicht schlechte Netzwerkqualität. Kann man uns hören?
And
no?
Axel can hear me, huh? So yeah. Okay, so I'll continue with the question.
Go ahead.
How did your recruitment process changed? Because I know how essential it is, especially on manager level, to get within the company managers that are already having, or they are fitting quite well within the change that you're proposing. If you would hire people with a control and command background, that would mean that you will have a step back in the process, because they would need also to face a different stage in their change management. So how did that change?
Yeah, George, that's a good point. On this one, I have been privileged again, because my predecessor worked a lot on getting agile coaches, education, and so on. You can imagine having 8 to 10 agile coaches now in global IT didn't happen overnight. You know, you went through it, so it takes time, and that was already done before my time. What I had to make sure now is that I get these agile coaches together with the line management and the team leads to really help them in this direction. So that's the one piece, and in some pieces right now I'm doing it with the people who are already on board, but I'm really looking at new additions. I'm getting involved in nearly every hire across all hierarchy levels, and I always ask questions not on the technical level but really on the soft skill level. What is kind of the mindset? I really want to get to know the person, because I know every addition we have to the team needs to have this kind of mindset in place. Therefore, we are working that, and hopefully with that, the percentage of people really living this mindset is increasing by the time.
Thank you very much, Axel. And one last thing, when selling the change, I know that everyone focuses on the benefits and the why we should change. Did you also, during that process, also mention what will happen if change will not be there? Loose of you know, the downside of not changing in the end will affect the company, but and it's usually broadly mentioned on a company level. But did you go into details? Okay, if we don't change, we will lose jobs, we will need to cut out other things, other benefits.
That's George, that's an interesting point, and it comes back to philosophy. I believe people do two things in life for two reasons, either due to love or to do fear. That's the main drivers in life. And I truly believe that if you can get them with the love, you should stay away from fear. And right now I'm just playing the love angle. And I hope I get a long way with that.
Thank you very much.
Love is in the air. Excellent.
Avoid pain and laugh a lot. Yeah.
Axel, Ansgar, I keep doing that. Axel, Ansgar, all the same.
So Axel, I have a question. And so this room now is full of agile coaches, and as you might imagine, they're all, you know, a little bit under stress how to do their projects, how to move forward, even COVID-19 times. What has been the most important part for you to work with us? So what do you need in an agile coach that you can say, yes, I'd really like to work with them. I'd really like to go forward with them.
And that's not fishing for compliments. It's just that so that the other agile
also maybe
coach...
something we didn't do, so it's okay.
I had to smile. There are a couple of things. I think I'm people who have a clear perspective on things, but at the same time are sometimes a little bit chaotic in the preparation, but I trust them because the process will work. And I looked at when I joined, you had also a couple of difficult problems, but you really kept your inner peace, and it didn't change your positive atmosphere in the mindset. And that's something which I acknowledge always, that they take whatever challenge you throw at them, they take it and embrace it as an opportunity. That's the one piece which I like about the mindset of agile coaches, because I truly believe that they are all, if you go this route, you have high emotional intelligence and you do it to the love of people. You want to do something better for the people. That's the one piece. And the other piece is really thinking in iterations and saying really the question, what is the real problem which we have at our hands right now? Because a lot of things, also the questions which were raised, which are really great questions, where I can clearly say, yes, I will probably be in this situation at some stage, but right now, that's not right now the issue at hand, because I just have to get to the next step. And as long if I have the direction right and the guardrails left and right, and really looking at the guardrails and what is the real true next step in the iteration, that's something, a capability which I think each good agile coach should have.
Okay. Thank you, Axel. I can honestly say I really appreciate it. You know, it's a platitude just to say it has been a pleasure. What I rather would like to say that you are definitely the one and only customer who always treated on eye level, even if things got rough, you know, and thank you for that. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you. I wish you would still thank you, Ansgar and Katja, and to all the rest, I wish you still a really nice day and keep the spirit.
Yeah, thanks for joining here. Bye-bye, Axel. Thank you.
Bye, Axel.
Bye.